No, fine. No. Right then. Well, look, welcome back to the Procurement and Finance Coffee Break. We, as you know, we chat about stuff that happens in business transformation, partly with a procurement point of view, partly with a finance point of view. And obviously, I tend to focus on the procurement, but Claire.
So today we're going to talk about Nike, though, from a business transformation point of view, just because it's been in the press quite a lot recently. And also we've seen quite a few people posting about the lessons learned at Nike on LinkedIn. So we thought we'd have a chat about it.
Well, so I suppose dive in.
Yes.
CEO, just changed after, I think, anyone who sort of follows anything in trade press, Nike have had some pretty difficult years. I mean, what do you think are the main lessons that business leaders could take away if they looked at Nike?
Yeah, so I suppose adaptability is key. So John Donahoe, I think that's how you say his name, obviously navigated the COVID-19 pandemic, which was unprecedented for all retail. So many retail companies folded during the pandemic, and it was a sad time. But basically, he pushed direct to consumer sales, and post pandemic, that's led to an over reliance on this approach.
Right.
I think a lot of Nike purchasers were going in stores, and where they'd pushed direct to consumer, so basically sales over the internet.
Yeah, but right thing to do in a pandemic when people couldn't go to the stores.
Yes,
right?
yes.
Okay.
But I think this sort of lack of diversification has led to other competitors like HON and I don't know how you say it, Hoka, is that how you say the other brand? Yeah. So they had basically got the shelf space in sports stores that Nike used to have. And as a result of that, that led to market share erosion.
Got it.
And I think also another thing you might have seen some of the other brands doing is where they've got sponsorship from like athletes and well-known sports stars. They're sort of Nike in the past was always able to leverage the power of brand storytelling. So it would be something about
just do it.
Yeah, just do it, basically.
Yeah,
but that hadn't happened as much in recent years, and you saw some of the other brands doing more of that. So I think basically the pandemic was a contributing factor, but to my mind, they forgot what their competitive advantage was in the marketplace and tried to come at it as a sort of a finance data point of view rather than what is our ethos, what's our competitive advantage, what is our why, in the words of Simon Sinek.
Got it. Yeah.
So Richard, given Nike's challenges around innovation and market share, what should companies focus on when trying to transform and stay competitive, to your mind?
Well, okay, you could talk about Nike, you could talk about anyone. If I think back to the 80s, late 80s, when I was at university, I had a pair of Nike Air Pegasus. And why did I get a pair of Nike Air Pegasus? Because they were air. This innovative design to soles to reduce impact by basically putting an air bubble in the shoe. And I think, it just leads straight to think innovation is a core driver. Innovation has to remain the engine upon which any company drives, especially when you're in, highly competitive industries. And let's face it, Nike are on a pretty competitive industry, particularly in the footwear now. And I think the other thing from, observing what's happened to Nike recently, Nike are a global brand. If you say Nike, just do it, the swoosh, you could recognize that anywhere, but that doesn't mean that the same thing works globally. Different cultures have different preferences. And I think, this problem, or the problems that they've had with collapse of market share relative to where they were in China, is because the way that Chinese consumers wanted to go and purchase their goods was completely different to the way that we in the West wanted to purchase goods. So I think balancing global, local strategies, whatever your product or service, is a really important thing to focus on. And then I think, the other problem is the one that happens to any large company, which is, you start as a, really innovative global brand, everyone aligned to driving innovation. And then eventually you become a big fat business where all the silos start to appear between the different functions.
Yeah.
And it becomes more about bureaucracy than about creativity. And you kind of get the feeling that, that's what Nike walked into. They just walked into a big company that kind of lost its way. So I think that's, that would be my take on it. And I guess, one of the interesting observations is who they've decided to bring back as their new CEO. Now, I think, who's it, Elliot Hill?
Yeah. So he was working somewhere else, but he had worked for Nike for
long time,
30 odd years.
Right.
Yeah.
So he'd have been there when I was buying my trainers.
Yes.
As a baby, actually, in the late 80s. No. Never mind. Yeah. Anyway, but yes, he would have been there. So he's a long term, would have gone through that innovative growth, and now they've got him back. So why do you think they've done that? Why do you think they haven't looked inward, but they've looked to someone who grew up rather than going to a competitor to get us?
I think it's that perhaps John Donahoe wasn't like a trainer guy at heart, maybe. Because there are people who are absolutely live and breathe trainers, aren't they? And collect them. Like I'm not saying Elliot is, but obviously has a deep brand understanding. The reason I'm saying it is there's those people who are absolutely fanatical about trainers, know all about all the different brands.
I mean, there are those
of us that just buy trainers.
Well, but there are lots of, but fundamentally, if your footwear is fundamental to any sport. You can't be passionate about a sport without being passionate about your equipment, and and that's what Nike was associated with. Brilliant footwear for sportsmen of all levels and abilities.
Yes, and having that sort of more authentic and innovative approach, and I think also, he's probably seen as a safe pair of hands. Lots of companies, when they just seen this recently, the PE-backed company, when the owners or the shareholders see that the leadership are failing to meet the targets that they agreed, can often be ruthless and make a change.
Well, we talked about this. Now, forget me, which was the coffee break we talked about M&A and takeover. The amount of value that gets destroyed in an M&A if you don't retain the brand of whatever you're acquiring. If you just sink it into the mud of your own business, you're throwing away all of that value.
Yeah, so I think that stability in leadership is something, and being a safe pair of hands is obviously something that he's seen to bring. But looking forward, what do you think the key areas of focus for Nike under Elliot Hill's leadership will be? I mean, we've obviously talked about return to innovation.
Well, I think that's a big one. So innovation is a core driver of success and successful transformation. Therefore, if you're going to come back to it, bring back the innovation that makes that brand exciting again to consumers that are buying it. And I think, they obviously went down a pretty digital focused direct to consumer route, but actually, maybe there's, a return to more balance between, high street presence and direct to consumer, so that you've got that. But of course, like every single brand, if you asked me honestly, do I associate Nike's brand with sustainability at the moment? The answer is no, I don't. I think other brands do it better. So I'm sure there's a play that they're going to be able to make as well, to connect with a generation of people who quite rightly think that's important. And I think, ultimately, the big target in front of Elliot as the new CEO is, how does he regain market share that's been lost as a result of that disconnection with their customers through what was probably the right strategy during a pandemic, but like all strategies, it overshot.
But you only got to see how that strategy hasn't worked out. If you walk down the high street, you will see lots of people wearing other brands that used to wear Nike.
Very true. And interesting, it's funny you say that, because interesting, you see brands on the high street that were never on the high street before. Which, you kind of think, well, you'd have thought brands that weren't on the high street, went through the pandemic, kind of had an affirmation that what they would do. But now they're on the high street because obviously they've realised that familiarity of consumers seeing them, it's got a value in itself.
Yeah, I think there's certainly some things where a physical presence on the high street. I mean, obviously, we all know our high streets are under pressure.
They are.
But there's certainly some things where people feel they get perceived added value from a physical location. And I think clothes will always be one of those things, right? Because people like to look at
absolutely.
clothes
I cannot imagine buying shoes online. That just doesn't make sense to me. I mean, I might buy them online, but I would have tried them physically once.
Yeah.
Okay, well, look, I guess the conclusion just goes to show no brand is too big to not have to think about how to evolve and how to transform and how to correct the course if things don't work. Right?
And I think I think on one of our first coffee breaks when we talked about IBM, do you remember?
Yes,
and we talked about how they did a survey of their staff, and only like 2 in 10 had skills for tomorrow there, and the I think it's CEO. I think her name was Gina Rimetti, who at the time.
You've got good memory.
Yeah.
Yep.
Anyway, I would like comparisons with this. Let's say at the moment, all the big consulting firms are going through a shift, because you're seeing, for example, consulting arms of companies break away and be sold off as part of a private equity deal. We're also seeing the effect of AI. And I personally think one of the biggest challenges for consulting firms for the moment is from the influence of AI innovation.
True.
So it's a lesson for all of us: is continue to innovate, and make sure you understand what your competitive advantage is.
And it's true, because if you think about it, if you're not innovating, you're just a me too, and me too always ends up as a race to lowest cost. Always. Innovation is what has value.
Yeah.
Well, look, there we go. A short and sharp coffee break. Just exploring a current case study. If you like it, please comment, subscribe, and more importantly, if you would like to talk about something with us, let us know, and we'll invite you to come and chat to us at the next Procurement and Finance coffee break. But for today, thank you and bye-bye.
Bye.